recorded, and there the recording has started. So certainly appreciate you all being here. With me from the BBT staff is Scott Douglas, who is the Director of Relationships and Growth, and also Lene Rodifer, who is the Director of Employee Benefits. And so we are certainly glad that you are here, and welcome any questions that you may have as we're working through the presentation. Scott Douglas, my colleague, will be watching the chat for any questions, and will certainly flag me down if I have any, or if you have any that you would like me to address. So with that, I will go ahead and kind of introduce myself a little bit to those of you who may not know me. I think there are a few that do, but for those that don't, and especially those that might take a look at the recording later, my name is Jeremiah Thompson, and I have been with BBT for a little over 4 years now. I came to BBT with a little bit of background in HR, also as an ordained minister, and also with Masters in Business Administration. So I have a very unique set of alphabet soup at the front end and back end with the Reverend and MBA. It's kind of a unique combination, but it works quite nicely for the task that is before us and before me at BBT. So certainly appreciate you being here. And with that, we'll go ahead and start taking a look here at the deck and working our way through that. So I apologize here. We're get to this next page. There we go. So as just kind of working through to start looking at table of contents, but one thing that I want to start with is that I really believe that everyone in this session has a very common goal, and that is to provide the best possible benefits that they can and care for the people that we serve, whether that be the pastors, the lay ministry, or whomever that we serve. And the health insurance landscape is so confusing and it's constantly changing. But with that context in mind, the idea is that we're going to take a look at a few possible options that you might want to consider as part of the benefits package at your local church. And one of those options is what's called an ICHRA. And you might be asking, well, what in the world is an ICHRA? Well, this was put into place in late 2019 with the intention of being able to be effective and available as of January 1 of 2020. What it means is it's an individual coverage health reimbursement arrangement. It's set up to be an alternative to traditional group health insurance and group plan coverage. And there's several different conditions and restrictions. You'll notice here our note at the bottom of this page. This is really meant to be a summary. I can't give you all of the details, just simply because there's a lot here. And it's really for educational purposes, and I can't give you legal advice. So as we're working through this, please understand that that's kind of the context and the framework that we're coming from. So back to what is an ICHRA. They're set up to be an individual account-based health plan that's funded by the employer and only by the employer. And those funds can be used to reimburse employees for the cost of their healthcare coverage, such as the premiums. And there's some other medical expenses that also might be eligible and may be eligible, and it's to be done on a pre-tax basis. And so that's where the savings comes in, is because the funds that go through an ICHRA would come at no cost. So here you can see our table of contents. We're going to start working through that. And we're going to spend a lot of time on this particular page. There's a lot here. And so I recognize that. So we're going to start working through it. But please, by all means, if you have questions, feel free to ask those. So enrollment in an ICHRA. Participants in an ICHRA must be enrolled in an individual health insurance coverage or some type of Medicare coverage. And it can be used for all types of Medicare. But they have to be enrolled in an individual coverage type plan. So that means that they're getting that from the marketplace, or they're getting that direct from an insurance company. What it cannot consist of is short-term limited duration insurance, nor can it consist of dental or vision or other similar exempted benefits from an ICHRA, and it cannot be provided under a healthcare sharing ministry. So the enrollment is really specific in the fact that you have to be enrolled in what is considered to be actual health insurance as defined by the Affordable Care Act. There's also the component of classes. Now, for some of you, you may be familiar with a QSERA, which is another type of product or structured HRA that can be used in a small employer environment. And there's some very different nuances that can take place between classes, between a QSERA and an ICHRA. We're going to focus on the ICHRA right at the moment, but we'll talk about some of those differences as we move through the rest of our time together. So as it relates to the classes, employers, you do have the ability to divide employees up into classes. And you can choose to offer an ICHRA to one or several of the classes combined and not to others. However, the ICHRA has to be on the same terms to all of the employees within a particular class. Now, employee classes that are eligible and how they are structured, it varies. So as an example, a class could be full-time employees or part-time employees. It could be employees working in a specific geographic location. It could be seasonal employees. There's a whole list of different things that can be used. The nuance that's specifically different between an ICHRA and a QSERA is that each class must have a minimum of 10 employees to be considered a class. And where that becomes a challenge for churches. And so we understand that, but that's why we're making sure that we point this out as it relates to the ICHRA. So an employee class of 10 employees is what you can use for an ICHRA. If you have less than 10 employees, then you have to offer it to everyone on the same terms, same conditions, same dollar amounts. You cannot split people up, and you cannot use clergy and lay as an eligibility for class distinction. So most churches aren't even going to be anywhere near that component as far as the 10, but just wanting to make sure that we point that out. Before I move to the next point, are there questions there?
Yeah, Jeremiah, this is Brent Gindelberger.
Yes, how are you, Brent?
Pretty good.
Good.
So I want to make sure I understand your last point.
Mm-hmm.
We have, well, actually, our husband and wife pastor team is going to resign at the end of the month, so that won't be an issue. Let's say we our new pastor, we hire a one person pastorship, and we have then we have a secretary and a organist and a custodian. So that's our entire employee situation. In the past, we've only offered medical insurance to the pastors. You're saying we would not be able to do an ICHRA in that case. Is that right?
Yes, if you're paying all of those folks for their services, which it sounds as though you are.
They're all employees. They're all W-2 employees.
Yeah, then you are correct. You would have to offer the ICHRA to everyone in employment, because
everyone or nobody at all. Right.
That's correct. Yeah, and if you don't offer it, I mean, there's no point in setting up the ICRA if you're not going to offer it to, to anybody, right?
Right.
And that's part of the trade-off between the QSERA. Brent, I know you and I have talked
Yes.
pretty extensively on the QSERA. But that's one of the trade-offs, right? The QSERA has its limitations on dollar amounts of how much you can contribute and give. The ICRA, that goes away. But this is the trade-off. This is one of the trade-offs, in that you have these limitations on who you can offer it to, and how you can structure who you are offering it to at one time.
All right. Thank you.
Jeremiah, this is Ray Flagg.
Yes, sir.
Sort of related to that question, is there no distinction between full-time or part-time? Because I'm sure those other employees, the organist and custodian, are part-time and generally wouldn't be eligible even for BBT benefits. So you have to offer them an ICRA also?
If you're under the 10, as Brent's example would be, yes, you would have to offer it to your part-time employees and your full-time employees, because you don't have enough to go over the 10. So let's say you had 10 full-time employees and 3 part-time. That's fine. You can offer it to just the full-time staff because you have 10 of them to create the class, right? And then you could go the other direction with the rest of them. As an example.
So in the part-time and full-time scenario, you see, and they need to be offered on the same terms. Is one of the terms a maximum dollar amount your contribution would be, or what would be examples of the terms?
So the examples of the terms would be how much. Yes. So there are some ways that you can differentiate between dollar amounts based on whether they're getting single or family coverage. And there are some others that you would want to get some legal advice on what you can and can't do. But everybody would have to be able to have the same amount and the coverage that's available to them. Because essentially what an ICRA is it's you're creating a group health plan by using the ICRA. And that's where it gets into some unique areas because you're creating a group health plan.
So the amount would be a maximum amount, like for a pool, you'd say everyone's eligible for $5,000. And if they use it, they use it. If they don't, they don't. Because everyone's going to have an individual plan, which the premiums will be different potentially.
Correct. Yeah. And you, as the employer, would fund the same amount to every employee.
Okay.
And then they would have the reimbursements that they would be submitting to you. And we're going to get into substantiation here in a little bit.
Okay.
As
That
to
makes
what that
sense.
means is what they need to submit for their, for their reimbursements. But yes, essentially what you're saying, Ray, is exactly the point. You would have to fund the same exact amount for every employee that they would be able to use.
Could another term be that I will pay 50% of your premium?
I don't know that answer right off the top of my head, nor has it been provided with our legal counsel's review, Ray. So I can't get into that one.
Okay.
Because that would take me over the line, and I think Lene would certainly not like it if I go over the line.
Oh, you want to upset Lene?
That's right.
Keep Lene happy.
That's right. That's right.
We can certainly ask the question though and get
Absolutely.
back to you, Ray.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But Jeremiah, you are much more in tune with the finer points of this program than I am. But I did want to go back and revisit one thing I heard Ray ask, where what if someone is so part-time that they don't qualify for our threshold minimum for insurance coverage? Is there any latitude there?
So, so Ray and Lene, thank you for pointing that out, because here's the difference, right? We're not looking at the eligibility of BBP's plans. you are creating your own group plan with an ICRA. And so the parameters and being able to separate a class means that you've got to have the minimum number of employees to be able to put into a class. And if you don't have that, they all get lumped together and eligibility goes out the window at that point.
Okay, you really meant what you said.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. Because, and we're going to get to the comparisons between a QSERA and an ICRA. And Brent, I think this will kind of resonate with you because you're very familiar with the QSERAs, in that, you know, QSERA is not a group health plan.
All right.
An ICRA is. And that creates this whole distinction about the eligibility question, right, as an example.
Yeah.
Because by creating your own group health plan, you're setting the parameters of eligibility.
And so to that point, Jeremiah, the eligibility of whether or not a participant within an ICRA group or class, how do I say this? Their ability to be able to access the BBT lineup of insurance products still is a consideration. You know, you might have a group of two, one who is working less than, you know, the minimum threshold, one who's working more than the minimum threshold for eligibility to a particular BBT product. But from the ICRA class perspective, both are considered a part of that group because there's not 10 or more in, you know, that you can divvy up into two different classes.
So the scenario where you have a full-time pastor, an organist who plays once a week, and a custodian who cleans up once a week, they're all the same. If I said, I'm going to pay your health insurance, in fact, that payment may be more than their salary.
Yes, very
Okay.
much so. Very much so.
So that kind of makes it unattractive in that, for that employee collection there.
Correct. Now, if you only have the one employee, then an ICRA is a really good option.
Yeah.
Because it removes the limit, right? Versus what the QSERA does.
Right.
And that's, you know, again, there's the trade-offs, right? If you want to get that limit removed, there's certain hoops and different ways that you have to finagle it in order to make it work. Whereas the QSERA, you know, you can break that up. You know, even if you just have one employee, you're saying, okay, we're going to set eligibility based around this particular employee type because they work 40 hours a week or they're salaried, and the other employee only works 30 hours a week or is hourly.
Yeah.
And you can split that very much easier within a QSERA than you can with the ICRA.
You know, Jerry, I don't mean to be a wet blanket. I'm just looking at time, and I think you're on like the second slide, and I don't know how many more you have to go, but some of this might be addressed later on in your presentation.
Yeah, and we're good on time. We're not.
Okay.
I'm not worried about that. I want to make
Right.
sure that we answer this question because I knew that this particular piece was going to be the crux of why an ICRA will or will not may or may not work in a church setting. So I appreciate the time check, Scott, but I knew that this was going to be a pretty important point to cover. Yep. Any
Thank
other
you.
questions on the classes component? Okay. So hearing none, we'll go ahead and we'll move forward into the opt-out. So there's an opt-out notice similar to a QSERA. There's notices that need to happen, and one of them with a QSERA or with an ICRA, I apologize, that is unique to the ICRA is an opt-out notice, and the reason for the opt-out notice, it needs to be given to an employee every year. And as we mentioned earlier, this is truly a group health coverage plan. And the opt-out notice needs to be given to the employees because it will impact their eligibility for premium tax credits through the Affordable Care Act. Because they're now in a group health plan, they won't be eligible at all for Affordable Care Act premium tax credits because they have an offering of employer group health benefits through their employer. That is very different from the QSERA where it could be offset. But this one is truly a group health plan, and so it goes away. And so that's why the opt-out notice needs to be given. And I think I can hear some wheels turning. You cannot force people to opt out. So I just want to make sure that that's clear as well. Any questions here?
Yeah, a very quick question.
Mhm.
Let's pretend I have the same situation of employees that I described before, one pastor and 3 non-pastors.
Mhm.
The classes, I assume it means you just have to quote unquote offer it to those 4 people. But what if all 3 non-pastors opt out? Can I still have the ICHRA?
Mhm.
I'm down to 1. So I'm down to
Yeah.
1 employee. I offered it to all 4.
Mhm.
3 of them declined.
Unfortunately, Brent, we're right on that line that and I think we might be a little over it with that question. As
Okay.
much as I would love to answer it for you, I don't know that I have the expertise to be able to answer it. And here's my hesitation, because I mean, let's say for whatever reason you go through open enrollment or their situation changes and they go through a life event. Then they may come back to you, Brent, and say, you know what? I need to enroll in the ICHRA because I've had a life event where I've lost my other coverage, and now the church has to give it to them.
Yep.
So I think in theory and the way that you're presenting it, it could be done. But it could put the church in a very unique situation because if their life changes for whatever reason,
Right.
then they could come back and say, I need to enroll. And the
Right.
church wouldn't have any option but to let them.
Yep. Same kind of rules as under a general group
Exactly right.
for you're just a regular employee, regular group employee. You can join in the middle of the year for certain circumstances. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
correct.
Thank you.
Yep. And I could get more into the details, Brent, if you would like and ask that question, but I think you kind of get my hesitancy and where I'm going with my thoughts on that.
No, it's beyond. Yeah. If I really need the answer, I'll get back with you.
That's fair. That's fine.
Okay.
Any other questions here on the opt-out? Okay, so at this point, we'll get into kind of the expenses that and the substantiation that comes as a result that needs to be done with the ICHRA. So to start the substantiation, we'll talk about what can be reimbursed. So there's an entire IRS Internal Revenue Code, and it's called Section 213B for those that are interested. But it lists out a bunch of medical expenses, and that particular code is the guideline for what you can reimburse out of an ICHRA for medical expenses. So it could be deductible expenses, it could be the premiums themselves. There's a whole host of different things that are in there. So it can reimburse for the employee and also their dependents if they're set up on a family plan, up to that maximum dollar amount that you as the employer would make available each year. Okay. Now, you as the employer, when you set up your plan, you can also limit which medical expenses are reimbursed. So as an example, one of the things that we've done at BBT is we created a sample ICRA plan document. And we've set it up to be reimbursement of premiums only, so that you don't get into the medical expenses for copays and pharmacy, pharmaceuticals and things along those lines. So there's some ways that you can work with your plan document to set up what you're willing to reimburse for. But the maximum amount or the maximum items would be out of that Internal Revenue Code. Any questions for that piece?
Could you explain what you mean by the term substantiation? There may be some of us that don't understand that, Jeremiah.
And I'm going to get to that in just a second.
Okay.
So we just talked about the types of things that can be reimbursed. One thing that I want to make sure that I'm very clear on as well is that if the plan document allows for the reimbursement of medical expenses, so going to the doctor or getting a prescription filled, the church would have to follow HIPAA privacy rules for the documentation that's submitted for the reimbursement. So you're going to have to make sure that you understand what those are and that you are following those rules. Now, what do I mean by substantiation? And to Scott's point, substantiation would be the invoice or the bill or some type of document that proves how much was spent on any particular expense. So whether that be the premium or for the receipt for the prescription drugs that were purchased, things like that. So that's what substantiation would mean. And the church would need to maintain those files in the event of an audit to prove that what they've reimbursed was truly a reimbursement for medical expenses. Does that clear up your question there, Scott?
So when you say substantiation is required at time of enrollment or at the time of reimbursement, when I'm enrolling in a particular insurance program that my employer is going to help to pay for or cover the cost entirely, I have to be able to prove I've actually gotten the coverage or I've actually spent the money on this particular health expense. Therefore, I'm going to need an invoice or some kind of enrollment form, probably need to show proof of insurance, that kind of thing is what you're talking about.
Absolutely correct. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
And that is why if you're reimbursing for medical expenses, like going to the doctor, you have to follow HIPAA rules because a lot of those documents have on their diagnoses and other personal health information, PHI, that would be subject to HIPAA. So you have to be very careful and cognizant of the fact that would be a situation if you're reimbursing for medical expenses. Any other questions on the substantiation component? Okay, so we'll talk about the annual notice. This is not any different than the QSERA. It's a 90-day notice. So if you want to start something on January 1, October 1, the year prior, you would need to submit, or you would need to provide to the employees what is available and that it's becoming effective on January 1. So you have a 90 days in front that you need to provide that. Federal agencies that regulate the ICRA do have and have issued a model notice so that you can use that for your purposes. And so it makes it much easier, but you do have to do it 90 days prior. So what does that mean from a setup perspective? You want to work backwards from that point. So if you want to do the ICRA, you got to do your notice by October 1, and you've got all the work ahead of that leading into it with the board approval, getting your plan document in place and all of those components. Ideally, you'd probably be starting right about now. You'd want to have a little bit of lead time because that gives you essentially 90 days from today to be able to get it in place by October 1 so you can make your notice. Any questions on that piece and on the annual notice? Okay, not hearing any or seeing any in the chat. So we will move forward to our comparison of a QSERA versus an ICRA. So one of the questions is the health reimbursement account or arrangement required to be integrated with group health insurance? For a QSERA, no. And remember, we kind of talked about this with the classes and how it's a little bit different than the ICRA. It's not considered group health insurance to have a QSERA. An ICRA is group health insurance. And so that is one of the main differences between the two. And so that's part of how this all works. You know, there's some differences in how employees can be offered the different products. The QSERA is employees enrolled in minimum essential coverage that do not have an employer group health plan. That can be done on a pre-tax basis. There's also a component where in a QSERA you can set them up, but it's not on a pre-tax basis if they're enrolled in their spouse's group health plan, as an example. But with the ICRA, again, we talked about the classes, right? And that's one of the major differences here is the class issue and having the minimum of 10. Can employees be offered another group health plan in addition to the HRA or to either one of the products? With the QSERA, no. But with the ICRA, they can't be offered another type of group health insurance plan, but there are other group health benefits that they could participate in. What can they reimburse? Those are the same. They're identical. It's all based off of Section 213D, medical expenses, and it includes the insurance premiums themselves. Here are the limits and the differences on the limits. QSERA has an individual limit of $5,250 and $10,600. That's as of January 1, 2021. They do index those and change them annually. And the IRS usually puts that out sometime in September, October range. But you'll want to keep an eye out for those when they come out if you're using a QSERA. And with the ICRA, there is no limitation. There's no minimum, there's no maximum of how much you can do. There are some variations that are allowed for various different components, family size, age, demographic components as well. Those are things that you would want to make sure that you clear with whomever you're using for your legal counsel to make sure that they're allowable variations. Any questions here?
Yeah, Jeremiah. Now my memory has to go back a couple of years because actually we were on a QSERA for a year or so, and then the last year and a half, our pastors were actually on a traditional group plan. So we did it. But going back to what I remember, it seems to me that even while we were offering QSERA, that I kept reading that if we were offering dental and vision, the government considered that to be a group health plan that would make us ineligible for the QSERA. Do you remember having discussions like that or going over things like that? And I never could figure that out.
Yeah, so dental and vision are considered a type of group health or a type of health plan. And so the QSERA you would not be able to enroll in any type of group coverage for dental and vision.
So that means
correct in that.
So that means, okay.
Yep.
So that means no QSERA if they were enrolled in BBT dental and vision.
As an example, yes. Yep. Now, the ICRA, that goes away because essentially what you're offering is another group product alongside your existing group products, if that makes sense. So,
Right.
and that's, again, you're setting up a group health plan to where you can do reimbursements out of it for the medical piece. Any other questions here or comments, concerns? Okay. Well, we had there's one other area that we wanted to cover, and that had to do with the American Rescue Plan Act. And we felt we would be remiss if we did not at least have a small discussion on this. Again, we're not legal experts. While I have a variety of different letters in front and behind my name, none of them are for legal purposes. Okay, so please understand that this is very high level, and this is from a perspective of just letting you know what we know at this point and what we're hearing, and we understand that the climate is changing, and these things could change soon. We just don't know. But one of the provisions within the American Rescue Plan Act was that it increased the availability of subsidies in the individual exchange, and it did that by raising the income threshold. Now, let's put the ICRA aside for a moment and think about a pastor or any kind of staff member or person going to the exchange and getting their health insurance from the marketplace. They're going to be looking at their taxable income and then determining whether they're eligible for some type of a government subsidy to help offset the premium. What they've done is they've taken, as a part of the American Rescue Plan Act, they've increased the dollar amount that you can be making in order to qualify for those subsidies. Now that increase is currently in force and increase that threshold, and it's through the end of 2022. Now, we are hearing some rumors and some comments that from a variety of sources. Okay, so this is not just from a singular source, it's from a variety of sources, that depending on how the political climate plays itself out in the midterms, that increased threshold may become permanent going forward. So what does that mean for you as you know, providing the best possible benefits that you can for your staff and for your churches? The ICRA, depending on how you want to set it up, and or the QSERA, those will impact the subsidies. It's just a matter of by how much. If you go with an ICRA, the subsidies would be completely gone. The QSERA would be offset. And one of the things that we're working on is we're trying to, at BBT, is we're working on a medical plan for the clergy and church employees. And you know, we're working through a variety of different modeling structures and understanding what we can do and how we can do it the best way we possibly can. Given these provisions of the American Rescue Plan, pastors and church employees may even be still better served to go to the marketplace, even up against our particular plan. So while we are working to try and find a way to provide it, and we are right on the cusp of being able to have that kind of an answer one way or the other on it, we're watching the landscape as it's changing, and we're not entirely sure how it's going to play out just yet. So it is what it is, right? And I don't know how else to put it. Any other thoughts, concerns, questions, or comments that you have here that you would like to address?
Well, Jeremiah, I'd just like to speak a little bit more to, just the American Rescue Plan Act opportunity,
Mhm.
where we would love to serve
Mhm.
the church employees with our medical plan. And as Jeremiah said, we're working on rolling that out. We've engaged with an actuarial firm to help us with the pricing model for that. And then, of course, the American Rescue Plan Act comes in the midst of this. And, I just look at it as what's going to provide the best benefit for the people we're trying to serve. And by the time you take a look at the qualifying income level, after we take into account housing allowance exemptions and the tax credits, and especially the changes made with this American Rescue Plan Act, it's going to benefit a lot of people to purchase individual insurance on the exchange. And so if the only concern or the main concern is the financial impact, it's going to be hard, I think, for us to compete with that with a group plan. But the flip side of that is what kind of coverage would they be obtaining? What kind of coverage would we be offering? We'd be offering coverage that is as robust as we can. And so, that might not be the case with somebody rushing out to spend as little as they can on the exchange. So there's that balance there. Just something to keep in mind. We're motivated to help your people with the best options available to them. And from a dollars and cents perspective, the purchasing on the individual exchange with the American Rescue Plan Act financially could make a lot of sense. But in that process, then, are people getting counsel around selecting an insurance plan that is going to meet their needs and their family's needs, rather than just looking for what looks like an inexpensive premium and having some big surprises hiding behind door number 3. So we'll keep you informed as our medical plan comes together. I think we're probably targeting, is it like September, Jeremiah, where we would have the information back from the actuarial firm so that we could really even look at, could we offer something that has appeal? We'll see where it goes, but just know our hearts are in it. We're also going to be honest with you. If we can't offer something that's going to compete with other options, we aren't going to try to sell you on a program just because we offer it.
Any other questions or comments on this particular area? Okay. Well, in the chat box, I placed the slide deck that we have gone through here this evening, and I also put my contact information in there. By all means, please, if you have questions, feel free to reach out. I am more than happy to address any questions that you might have and help in any way that I possibly can, short of being able to give you legal and tax advice. But I am more than happy to help in any way I can with any questions that come up.
Jeremiah, this is Ray again.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to make sure I understood the discussion earlier correctly about the Quacera.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say that if someone was participating in the BBT dental coverage, then they are not eligible for Quacera?
Or the other way around. Yeah, whichever way you want to work with that. That is correct. So if you run the Quacera, you would not be able to participate in the dental plan or the vision plan that we offer. That is correct. You could still participate in short-term, long-term, and the life insurance but you would not be able to participate in dental and vision.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
I'm not seeing any. Okay, well, again, I appreciate your time on a Thursday evening, and we are certainly grateful for your time. We have covered a lot of material tonight, and it's been our goal to provide you with some insight and some tools to help you offer the best possible health insurance benefits to the church employees, to our church employees, while leveraging the best possible financial advantages that are available. Our hope is that this information will help you to navigate the options that are available. And I certainly welcome you to reach out to me directly if you have any questions. And certainly would welcome those emails and be able to help in any way I can. Are there any final questions before we close out for the evening? Plan on giving you about 10-15 minutes back on your evening. But if you have any other questions, please let me know.
Jeremiah, you had indicated that you had put your contact information in the chat box. I'm not seeing it, so.
Yep, you know what? I apologize. I had clicked the drop-down box that I didn't intend to click, and Lene, who already has all of that information, is the one that received it.
I have to admit, I was chuckling, thinking, "Do you think I don't know how to get a hold of you?"
So let me send that to everyone, and we will make sure that you have that. Okay, so now everyone should have received now the file, the slide deck, that you can easily download right out of the chat box, and also my contact information. Again, I apologize, that went to one person instead of to everyone. So thank you, Scott, for pointing out my shortcomings.
What I live for, Jeremiah.
I know you do. All right, any other questions or concerns or issues? I want to make sure everybody has time to get that file or get down the contact info if you would like it. But certainly appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
You are quite welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Jeremiah.